Hey everyone, it's Carl. And one of the cool add-ons that you'll find for Savage Worlds is the Adventure Deck. The Adventure Deck has a bunch of cards that describe situations and things that could happen that you can play, and it can change the course of a battle. It can add a bunch of cool narrative stuff to the game. It's pretty cool, honestly. So let's talk about that. So roll. It's a savage world. Strangers a weird war. It's Hey everyone, it's Carl with Tabletop Tango. Look at the bubbles, do the stuff. Really would appreciate support, and more likes and subscribes would be even cooler. So anyway, let's talk about the adventure deck. Some people have asked, "Hey, can you talk about it a little bit?" And I will. It's a very simple. It's a very simple part of the rules. First off, it's optional, so you don't have to use it. And I'll tell you some places you probably don't want to use it, but it's real simple. It's three sentences or paragraphs, how you want, on a card. One of the cards that come in the deck has the rules, and the rule is you shuffle the adventure deck at the start of a game session. You deal a card out for each rank a player has, and then you may play one card per session. There may be cards that let you draw additional cards, in which case you might be able to play again. And it allows for players to trade cards. So if you get a card that doesn't really make sense for your character, you might be able to trade it to someone else at the beginning of the session. Now, rules as written, it says players can trade cards or play them for others as they like, unless the card says otherwise. So that implies you do not have to just trade at the beginning of when you get the cards. You can trade anytime, if that's how I'm reading that rule. So when should you use them? When might not be a good idea, because they're really cool, right? And so you might want to use them all the time. But first thing you got to realize, are you a game master who can handle kind of rolling with the punches, can handle things that come up to you on the fly? There's cards like Here Comes the Cavalry that brings in reinforcements. So if you have a really well-designed scenario or encounter, and the players come and they're playing these cards that can try to shift the balance, you got to be able to be able and willing to kind of roll with that and deal with it. And if you can't, maybe they're not the right thing to use, because they really can swing the balance of a session. And that's their job, is to add, adventure flair and cool stuff to what's going on. Second thing is, not all settings lend themselves, right? So if you're playing a horror setting, or you've got a setting that's maybe using gritty damage, or you've got a setting where, they're going against uber powerful things that are just too much, there can be adventure cards that, make a change there, or can screw with things, even to the point of your narrative, right? You have an adventure and an NPC that has a particular goal and to move in this direction, and the player plays love interest card. Love interest card basically says, there's going to be some affection between the player and an NPC. It doesn't have to be immediate. I've seen a lot of people using adventure decks, and they do make it immediate. Like in a battle, somebody starts swooning, but it'll be over time. So now you, as a game master, you may have to kind of change things up and say, well, that NPC was going to be this, but now it's this. Why not, though? That's kind of fun. So it goes back to, are you willing to roll with the punches, change your story to match that, build new stories and new ways of doing things based on that. So it's kind of cool. So then let's talk about what I do. I don't run on rules as written. Now, for better or worse, it's just what I do, and you can say that I'm completely off base. That's fine. I'm just telling you what I do. So first thing is, I deal one card to each player at the beginning of a session, period. Doesn't matter which rank you are. Seasoned, you're not getting two, etc. You get one. And the reason I do that is really, as you get higher, ranks, you're more powerful anyway. So to add in, now you're getting two cards, now you're getting three cards, and you pick the best of. It seems like that's kind of accelerating that. And adventure cards are supposed to be something that just kind of adds fun and flair to the game. And so nothing says you absolutely have to be able to play a card in a game session. Sometimes you might not be able to. That's kind of part of the way things are in my world. So you get one card, and maybe it's applicable, maybe it's not, because I also don't have players trading cards, whether at the beginning or in the middle or whatever. And I don't know really reason for that, whether there's a reason I do that, other than it's easier, because VTTs being what they are, trading cards around. And again, sometimes you just don't get a card that's useful for what you're trying to do. That being said, I do allow players, if they can figure out how this might match, be able to play a card that supports or helps somebody else. So, if you've got a card that says you get a bonus on something, and yeah, well, he really needs the bonus on that. Maybe I can do something, almost like a support. Can you narratively describe how that card could be played for somebody else? All right, it's fine. I mean, it's all about fun anyway. So let's do it. Why not? Let's go. Um, so other things that I do sometimes, but I think is important for everyone who's looking at, okay, this stuff doesn't make sense. There's stuff that's overpowered, or I perceive it to be overpowered, or they don't just match what I'm trying to do in my setting. You can curate the deck. I mean, come on, that's allowed no matter what, right? This is Magic the Gathering. We curate a deck. So here you can curate the deck. So you can pull things out that you think are overpowered, don't make sense for your game, or you just don't want to, roll with that punch, like Love Interest. I'm going to pull that out. I don't care. Things like second wind in a gritty game. Maybe that's not something you want. You want to pull that out of the deck. In a game where the players are, sort of on the run, and it's kind of more of a mano-a-mano kind of game where small party versus, small other groups. Things like now pulling out the card Angry Mob, which is where commoners show up to help out. That might not make sense. Maybe it does. Maybe, you're in a cyberpunk world and all the folks who live in that part of the slums do come out. But you got to be willing to play that. I literally just leave the whole deck as is. First off, I don't mind rolling with things, and two, I'm lazy as far as my game goes. I'll just, VTT, here's the deck. You get to draw one. All those other things I talked about, I play them. So that's the adventure deck. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Every card really describes what you can do with it, what its impact is. There's just a whole bunch of cards with, different approaches to how they're doing things. I just mentioned a few of them, too many to talk about, but they add flavor, but you got to be willing to deal with that flavor it adds. You might want to curate it if your session or if your setting doesn't really apply to that setting. It's not really applicable. Maybe you don't want to do that. You might not want to run them as the rules as written, even though they're short little rules. You can use them however you want. They're an aid, right? You could, I don't know, you could use those as something that your bad guys get and that they get to play to mess with high level players. Now that probably would piss them off, but okay. You could maybe let them have a card and keep it session to session if it's an important one that they want to keep. Okay. And save it just for that right moment. That's fine too. Especially if you're going to be stingy on conviction and stuff like that. They may really want to hold on to a card that adds a big benefit for them at some future point. So you can do a lot of stuff with them, but simple, kind of fun. You got to be able to handle it though. And I know you can. So anyway, this is Carl with Tabletop Tango. Again, look at the bubbles, do the stuff. Would love you to like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and catch our other videos. Thanks much.
So roll. It's a savage world. Strangers a weird war. It's a savage world. Classic